Hey there, students. We are live for some AP European History review, and this week we are going to be focusing on the age of absolutism. Now, if you're watching on YouTube, be sure to click on the link below. There is a link to the Crowdcast. Now, the thing is, the Crowdcast has a lot of benefits for us because this is going to give you notifications when I'm going live. You're going to be able to come in and ask questions. That's going to be kind of a kind of a VIP kind of stream. So you definitely want to get in on that. Okay, so you definitely want to get in on the Crowdcast stream if you are into that sort of thing. So go ahead and do that. Also, we've got some, information about Marco Learning student support. So with that, just understand that I'm going to be, paying the most attention to the folks in the Crowdcast. But then again, I will be checking on the YouTube chat once in a while as well. Okay, so ready to help you pass the exam. So remember, those of you who are in the in the Crowdcast, you're able to ask questions. Okay, that's another thing. So make sure that you get your questions in and all of that, all of that kind of stuff. So with that, let's go ahead and go into the questions. Now, remember, tonight's topic is the age of absolutism. So those are going to get priority, and we've got Pog in the chat. All right, so let's go ahead and go to our questions. And so we see things here. What are the main things we should know about by test day? Now, Jess, that is probably the worst question that anyone can ever ask. All right, now, and then 18 people agree with it. Okay, so as far as that goes, now YouTube is just YouTube, Tom Richey. If you're in Crowdcast, there's no reason really to go to YouTube. But as far as that goes, let's go ahead and we should know by test date. It really depends on what's on the test. Okay, so as far as that goes, the test can be drawn from anything in the course and exam description. So as far as that goes, I would ask, questions should probably be a little bit more specific. Fahim, I love you too, and we got so many pogs in the chats there. Okay, so which countries that practiced absolutism are necessary to remember for the exams? Now, here's the thing about the AP exam so we got somebody, Van Gogh Starry Night. You say you got this poster? It's actually, I think, a painting of some sort, not quite a poster, but we'll go ahead and let that be a poster. So as far as that goes, that a lot of the AP exam is free response. Okay, so when you think about whether you're doing like a DBQ or an LEQ, now a DBQ is going to be what it is, but those of you who are taking a paper pencil exam, if you have an LEQ about the age of absolutism and you happen to know a whole bunch about absolutism in Prussia or Austria-Hungary or something like that. Maybe even how absolutism was applied in the Ottoman Empire. Now, as far as that goes, though, if I were going to say, like, there are three that you should really focus on, okay? First of all, you want to focus on France, Louis XIV. Second, Peter the Great. How many of y'all seen my WAP parody? If you haven't seen that yet, make sure to go over to the YouTube channel. Just search for Tom Richey WAP or something like that, and you'll be in for a nice surprise. So I would say that Louis XIV's France, Peter the Great's Russia, and then you want to know how absolutism failed in Britain. Okay, so that's something. As far as that goes, the English Civil War, the Glorious Revolution, those would be the three places where I would place most of my emphasis. Now, I would also note the Dutch Republic, which has kind of got its own thing going during the age of absolutism, given that the Dutch Republic really wasn't even a monarchy at all, but just kind of a hodgepodge federal state that rose up out of a rebellion against Philip II. So, as far as that goes, yeah. So y'all have got, we got some good stuff going in the chat here, so I appreciate that. And so are there notes that you have for us to print or something? In this case, probably not, okay, on this particular broadcast. But actually, let me go in and let's go over a few things. I'm going to go ahead and throw some slides up because people wanted to know about the main stuff here, okay? So one thing, I've got a lecture on Peter the Great. I've got a proper lecture on Peter the Great that's on YouTube. So if you want want the thorough lecture, make sure to go over there. But I'm going to go ahead and throw a couple things up here. Okay, so let's go ahead and just have a quick review of Peter the Great and his reforms in Russia. And so as far as that goes, all right, so we've got here, all right, we are screen sharing properly. And so Peter the Great, 1672 to 1725. Now remember, 1648 is the end of the 30 Years' War. And so really most of our stuff here in the Age of Absolutism is going to be post 1648. But then again, when we think about, the English Civil War is also going on in the 1640s. So as far as that goes, James I, Charles I, they're, a little bit before, but Louis XIV and Peter the Great, they're going to be in the late 17th, early 18th century, okay? And so Peter the Great, there are two W's here that we can think of here, okay? So when we think of Peter the Great, Westernization, first of all, okay? Because remember, Russia is the easternmost European country. And as the easternmost European country, Russia at one point had been taken over by the Mongols, all right? So they were under the Mongol yoke for some time, and they still had some ways of dressing that were, really looked more Eastern than Western, okay? But Peter the Great decides, look, we are going to orient Russia toward Europe. Now, of course, part of that is, we can see here, there is young Peter the Great wearing his, Russian caftan, okay? So this is the kind of thing that looks more like traditional dress in Asiatic countries, not in not in Europe. You can still see people wearing similar clothing in India and Pakistan, especially when they're going to like formal events and stuff like that. Now, later on, there's Peter the Great suiting up like Barney Stinson. Peter here, you can see he is dressed like a Western European ruler. Now, note also that Peter has got a mustache but no beard. Peter is clean shaven and actually instituted a beard tax in order to encourage people to go along, with his westernizing reforms there. And so there you see, see Peter the Great's folks. They're going to cut, they're going to cut your robe. They're going to cut your beard. Basically, they're just going to make everything shorter. And so as far as that goes, that's one of Peter the Great's reforms is westernizing Russia. Now, the other thing here is his warm water ports, okay? So when we're looking at Peter the Great, when he becomes Tsar, there was really only one port that Russia had at Archangel. Now, this is basically like you got to go around Scandinavia to get there. So that is the only port that Russia had at that time. And so Peter the Great is determined to get warm water ports that will stay open year round, okay? Not something that is, going to be open for 6 months, closed for 6 months, iced over. No, okay? So Peter wants something here in the Baltic, and then he wants an outlet to the Black Sea. Now, that has two reasons for it. That can be, first of all, when you're thinking about trade, all right? There is a big, a big emphasis during this time on trade. This is the time when in Louis XIV's France, they are applying mercantilism. But in this sense here, Peter the Great wants warm water ports, and he's using warfare to get there. Now, again, he's also developing the Russian Navy, okay? So he is he's reforming his military on the Prussian model. He's got him a Western general. So he goes on these campaigns in order to get these warm water ports. So remember, with Peter the Great, Westernization and warm water ports. Okay, so a little bit of Peter the Great for you there. Possibly my favorite, ruler in all of European history. Okay, so as far as that goes, ladies and gentlemen, let's see, what we've got here. So thank y'all for your nice comments over there. And so, oh, we got some Germans watching, and like actual Germany, and big up Sweden. Okay, thank y'all. I mean, we got actual Europeans watching this thing. Yeah, so basically the Azov campaign was an effort to get a warm water port on the Black Sea. Okay, so Peter the Great wants a warm water port on the Black Sea. So with that, let's go ahead and see what we've got here. Okay, so then we're going to go ahead and close that one out right now. We've got a few things people are asking about enlightened absolutism. Okay, so enlightened absolutism, you could say that it's part of this topic, but then again, usually when we think about enlightened absolutism, we're thinking about Unit 4. Okay, so when we're talking about the scientific revolution, the Enlightenment, we're going to be in Unit 4, but then again, what we want to think of is that the enlightened absolutists were, they had a foot in each camp, because they are, so warm water ports, Claire, for trade and for military purposes. Okay, so Peter also believed Russia needed a strong navy. That was really his passion, building a modern navy on the European model. So enlightened absolutism, these folks are, ruling absolutely. I got the song in my head, ruling absolutely. All right, so as far as that goes, that they are ruling absolutely, but they are typically in the late 18th century. Okay, so whereas Louis XIV, Peter the Great, late 1700s, early 1800s, the enlightened absolutists later in the 18th century. So enlightened absolutism can be seen this way, but they are trying to, go into principles of the Enlightenment. So when we think about this, Louis XIV, okay, who I think is the most important absolutist, Louis XIV, remember that Henry IV had given the Edict of Nantes. Okay, the Edict of Nantes is something that, is giving the French religious toleration. Louis is like, nope, one king, one law, one faith. Y'all see me? I was about to put up two, and it's like, nope, not two, one of each. One king, one law, one faith. Okay, so that's Louis XIV. One king, one law, one faith. So Louis revokes the Edict of Nantes. Louis's like, no, like we are going to all be of the Catholic religion. Peter the Great, even though Peter the Great did challenge the power of the Russian Orthodox Church, Peter did not allow Russians religious toleration. Okay, if you were Russian, you were going to be part of the Russian Orthodox Church. Now, Voltaire indicates that Peter allowed for religious toleration for foreigners, but of course that's part of Peter trying to draw Europeans to his new city at St. Petersburg. Not that Peter believed in religious toleration in general. So note that while Peter challenged the power of the Russian Orthodox Church, Peter was a devout Russian Orthodox Christian. And so going from there, that is something, that when we're thinking about this, we are, when we're thinking about this, where was I? That you've got to think about Frederick the Great. Okay, Frederick the Great, he is thinking in terms of religious toleration. Joseph II liberalized to some extent. He gave some religious autonomy to Jews, okay, as far as in their education and that sort of thing. So with that, when we look at the enlightened absolutists, they are applying the principles of the Enlightenment in a way that Louis XIV and Peter the Great are not. Okay, that they're really not about applying the principles of the Enlightenment. And so as far as that goes, we'll see. So that's the main thing that you want to note. But at the same time, Frederick the Great and Catherine the Great and Joseph II are still applying principles of absolutism, okay? And then we also want to note that Catherine the Great, okay, even though she's an enlightened absolutist, we're typically going to look at Catherine the Great in terms of her patronage of the philosophes, okay? Now, when we think about patronage, we want to go all the way back to the Renaissance. Remember how Lorenzo de' Medici and the papacy see, were patrons of artists, okay? In a similar way, you see that Frederick the Great and Catherine the Great were patrons of the philosophes, okay? Like people like Voltaire and Diderot. In fact, Catherine the Great, one of my favorite stories about Catherine the Great is she heard that Diderot, the editor of the Encyclopedia, co-editor and author of a whole bunch of cool other books, that he was having a hard time financially. And so she decided that she was going to purchase his library. So she sent him like money to purchase his library. So now Diderot's library belongs to Catherine the Great of Russia. Now, on top of that, Catherine was like, I don't need it right now. I want you to hold on to it, and I'm going to pay you an annual salary to be my librarian. And so that's how she's helping. Okay, now when Pugachev like rebelled against her, she put him in a cage and had him tortured and cruelly put to death. So she wasn't really, you know, applying principles of the Enlightenment too much in her rule, but she was very good to the philosophes. She corresponded extensively with Voltaire. Diderot actually went to visit her. He wasn't a big fan of traveling, but he visited Catherine the Great, and he complained like she'd sit by him, and when he'd make her laugh, she'd just like slap his thigh or something, and he was just like, it hurts, like she just won't stop like slapping my thigh, and I can't say anything to her because she's the freaking like Empress of Russia. And so with that, yeah, so note that these are absolutists, but they're applying the principles of the Enlightenment. But you think about whether it's Louis XIV, Peter the Great, or let's remember the failed attempt at absolutism in England, okay, in Britain, England, Scotland, whatever we want to call that, because it's sort of like in flux at this time, right? And so remember that James the First and Charles the First, that they tried to put, to put down, to say that, look, you're going to be Anglican or you're going to be nothing, okay? That in pure absolutism, religious toleration is not a thing. A push, yeah, do teachers have to deal with kids making a lot of Hamilton references? They do. That wasn't relevant, but you know what, Jess, I'm just going to go ahead and let that, yeah, that is one of those things, especially me being a big Thomas Jefferson fan. It gets really annoying, especially like, oh, I'm interested in history. I memorized the Hamilton musical. It's like, no, you're not interested in history. You just memorized the Hamilton musical. Like, come on, man. As far as that goes. So with that, let's see. On the top, it says, what session are we on? Because, with this, yeah, so this is Olivia session 3, okay? And we're going to actually, right now, there are 5, interesting, okay? Yeah, I don't know what's going on there. We'll figure it out. Whatever it is, we'll figure this out, okay? I don't know what it is, but you know what? We're on absolutism right now. Which test do I recommend, in person or digital? First of all, a lot of you are not necessarily going to have a choice. Your school will make the decision for most of you. Now, with that, let me go ahead and put a poll in and say here, what format, format will you be taking? Okay, so let me go ahead and say here, paper, pencil. Let's see. Computer at school or computer at home, or don't know yet. Okay, so some of y'all may be in that position where you don't know yet. Okay, so let's go ahead and see what we're looking at. Here. Okay, so as far as that goes, paper, pencil, computer at school, computer at home, or you just don't know yet. Okay, so a lot of y'all now, do y'all know you're taking a computer at home? Because I'm kind of curious about that, because I think that's like a special a special thing or something like that. All right, yeah, y'all should be able to like go into Crowdcast here where there's a point where it says more. If you look up at the top, you can go on to more, and you can go on to the previously scheduled things here. Okay, so you can see the previous things. So just go ahead and keep that in mind. You can go in Crowdcast. You should be able to look at the previous sessions. So a lot of y'all think y'all are doing computer at home. Good luck with that. Okay, we'll see. Now with that, let's go ahead and what are the distinguishing? Yeah, so we've been over enlightened absolutism and all of that. Let's see. Overall review. Okay, could I go over absolutism in Prussia? Now, those of you who are wondering like how to ask questions during this thing, okay, the way that we ask questions, okay, is we ask about specific topics, okay? You let me know, hey, can we go over this? Now, remember, I've got a video on absolutist Prussia. So what we want to note here, and on my TikTok and Instagram, I think I made a little like 1 minute long music video that y'all might like. Now, remember, Instagram, TikTok, and all that is at Tom Richey. If you join us during the session right now, we'll go ahead and give you a little shout out. Just like IFMSI, I think that was 2 hours ago, so that's not during this thing. It's funny, some people are going back and liking my Ides of March post from last year. So with that, what we want to note about absolutist Prussia, okay, is that all absolutists are militaristic, okay? So when we're thinking about this, all of the absolutism is inherently militaristic, but the Prussians pretty much outdo everybody here, okay? So a few things about Prussia, and again, I've got, a lecture online that I did some time ago. So Prussia had been part of the Holy Roman Empire. Prussia is kind of like if we were going to give an award for like 1500 to 1900 or something like that, most improved state, okay, most improved European state, we would say Prussia, Germany, okay? Basically, Prussia started off as just a principality within the Holy Roman Empire, which, of course, Voltaire said was neither holy nor Roman nor an empire. So it was part of this overall confederation of smaller principalities. And so with that, there is Brandenburg, okay? Brandenburg is within, within the Holy Roman Empire, and then Prussia is kind of over here. So you've got basically like Brandenburg, Prussia, and, it's just this kind of like hodgepodge. And eventually it grows into what will later become Germany, okay? And so with that, Brandenburg, Prussia, which we can see, yeah, so here is Prussia way over here, and then we've got Brandenburg. So that's going to grow up. Now, Prussia is ruled by the Hohenzollern Dynasty, who I call the Fredericks. Now, here's the thing. Besides Frederick the Great, Prussia is basically Frederick the Great, somebody you should probably know by name, but basically, as long as you understand that these are a bunch of people named either Frederick William or Frederick William. There we go. Eleanor Engel and Khalid 999, whatever, par for okay, Eleanor is going on a mad like spree. Okay, so yeah, she is going on a mad like spree over there. So with that, thanks for the love, Eleanor and Casey Cowan. So their names are either Frederick William or Frederick William. Like, that's basically all you need to know. Like, I just call them the Fredericks. Okay, it starts with the Great Elector. You can kind of go through here and see what's going on here. So militarism. Okay, what we want to note about the Prussians is that they were the 12th largest European state in terms of population. Now, of course, they're later going to become Germany, which is like the largest state in Europe today. But it started off with Prussia, the 12th largest in population and the 4th largest army. They realized it's almost like when you think about the United States today. It's like, the United States is a distant third in terms of population in the world, but has the largest military in the world. Okay, and so with that, they've got this army, and it becomes this basically the standard that Peter the Great, as we said earlier, like he adapted the Prussian model. The United States first drill book, Baron von Steuben, who was from Prussia, came in and trained Washington's troops at Valley Forge. So it was known as the Sparta of the North. Okay, and you can see some stuff in the rap that I've made over there, on TikTok and Instagram there. But basically, the Soldier King, he was a very interesting, man there. And so with that, we also want to note that the Prussians are also the first to adopt a system of compulsory public education. We want to note that the Prussians would be a great example of cooperation between the nobility and the absolute monarchy. Okay, so when you're looking at this, when we look at Louis XIV, he's subduing the nobility. Whereas when we're looking at Prussia, there is this cooperative effort here. And so with that, we can see here that, the power of the representative bodies are put down. Now, one of the big things here is Frederick the Great Elector was able to get taxation by decree. That's one of the biggest things for absolutism in general. So when we're thinking about the big picture of absolutism, what we want to understand about this is that the absolutist has to be able to rule, without interference from representative bodies, especially. Okay. So as far as that goes, that when we're getting into that, that's Prussia. Now, none of this would be complete if we did not go into what happened in Britain. Okay, so we're going to talk about that as well. Okay, so we'll make sure that we hit that. Of course, we've got something here. Yes. Okay, so Tuvia, you are asking a great question here. So, the causes and goals of Louis XIV's wars. Now, one thing we want to note, Andrea, it's a written test, right? Or a type test or whatever y'all going to do this year, right? So Louis XIV's wars, okay? We want to note here that we don't need to know like all of the wars necessarily. There are two that are important here. Okay, so as far as that goes, I'm going to go ahead and again, this is something I've got a series on Louis XIV's wars on my YouTube channel. Okay, so with that, going into Louis XIV's wars, we want to note that standing armies are a big deal for the absolutists. Now, Prussia's not going to be able to compete with this as far as that goes. Prussia is not going to be able to have something the size of Louis's army. Okay, they've got the fourth largest, but Louis's got the largest. He's got a standing army of 400,000. So as far as that, okay, so with that, just a second. All right. All right, and so with that, we want to note that Louis brings out, now this is something, let's connect this to where we were last week, okay? So last week we left off at 1648. So we want to understand that 1648, the Peace of Westphalia, this is a turning point because the 30 Years' War had been a war that was primarily religious, at least when it started, okay? It was primarily a religious war. And so as that, it became increasingly like continental and dynastic. Okay, now by dynastic, what I mean here is when France decided, Cardinal Richelieu decided he would apply this principle of politique, okay, or politicue, or whatever you want to call it, right? You're not going to be asked about this orally. So with that, when we're thinking about this, that when France gets involved, it is a matter of the Bourbon dynasty wanting to weaken the Habsburgs, okay? So that's why France gets involved on behalf of the Protestants, okay? France gets involved on behalf of the Protestants because they care more about what's best for France in the balance of power. So with this, we want to note that after the 30 Years' War, Louis XIV and France, this becomes like the new challenge to the balance of power. And so the Habsburgs, Louis wants to break Habsburg dominance. And of course, Louis is part of the Bourbon dynasty. Kids, y'all aren't aren't old enough to drink, so don't do that, but it's just a way to remember this. So Louis's got 4 wars, of which the Dutch War and the War of the Spanish Succession are going to be the most, the most important. Okay, the Dutch War and the War of the Spanish Succession. So going from that, we'll first take a look at what's he doing here. Now, his overall objectives that we can think of here, and this is where historians get into this, and I've actually got a DBQ about the absolutist where I say, like, one of the questions I like to ask about the absolutist is, to what extent was Louis thinking about France, and to what extent was Louis thinking about himself? Now, of course, one thing is egomaniacs can sometimes make, terrible absolute rulers, but sometimes they can be great absolute rulers, because Louis's ego, as far as that goes, the greater Louis is, the greater France is. The greater France is, the greater Louis is. And so Louis, when we assign his motives, what we're thinking about here is, that what are the things here that Louis is, doing here. So going from there, he wants personal glory. Now, there are some historians that are basically going to say that these are like vanity wars that Louis is fighting here. But now at the same time, Voltaire is actually, like, when I talk about, hey, being an egomaniac and an absolutist may not be the worst thing in the world, that when we're looking at this, Voltaire says he did not separate his own glory from the advantage of France. Every king who loves glory loves the public good. So this is where we think about these motives. They may not be mutually exclusive, okay? That whatever advances Louis advances France. Now, as far as his targets, the Habsburgs and the Dutch, okay, we won't really worry about the War of Devolution. It is good to know about the Treaty of Dover, which was struck between Louis the 14th and Charles II of England. Now, Charles II of England, Scotland, rather, he is the one who was the merry monarch. He's always in debt, and all of that. But as far as that, the secret Treaty of Dover, this was a treaty between, between Britain and, and Louis the 14th, where basically they are going to double team the Dutch. And so you've got the Royal Navy and then Louis's massive land force. So the Dutch War, 1672 to 78. Now, this is the Dutch have so many great words. Rampjaar, okay, Rampjaar. This is the year of disaster, the disaster year. So when Louis, basically you've got this like confederation of, hodgepodge little states, and they're, trying to defend themselves against the largest army in Europe, led by the Sun King himself. Now, not personally, but, it's his army, right? And so what happens here is the Dutch, they elect a stadtholder. Now, a stadtholder is not a king. I've actually got a video, What is a Stadtholder, where I, investigate, what exactly is this office. But William III, William of Orange, who is later going to become the King of England, Scotland, he is going to be named stadtholder of Holland, Zeeland, Utrecht, Gelderland, and Overijssel, okay, which Dutch is a fun language to speak, y'all. So what happens here is they use the best weapon they have. They basically flood. They'll just flood the whole floodplain here, and that's that's what we're going to see. Basically, okay, Louis, good luck getting your armies over that. And so we see here where the Dutch, they use whatever they can. Now, the Dutch are able to hold their own, partly because of their naval superiority. Michiel de Ruyter, okay, de Ruyter, this guy's a legend. They've even got a movie about him. The movie's called Admiral. But the Dutch all know who this guy is, okay? This is like a legendary Dutch admiral. And at the end of the day, Louis gains cities from the Spanish Netherlands, not the actual, like, Dutch Republic, but the Dutch Republic will begin a period of decline. This is kind of a Pyrrhic victory for the Dutch Republic because they had basically been the biggest, like, traders of their day, and they just really could not afford the strain of a war with Louis. Now, again, Louis did not win this war, but we do see the decline of the Dutch Republic from this war, as far as that goes. So with that, now the Glorious Revolution of 1688. This is something that we can look at this two ways. We can look at this in terms of the history of England, where this is something that is bringing about a permanent constitutional monarchy within England. But we also want to note that the Glorious Revolution of 1688 is also something that shifts the balance of power. Okay, so it shifts the balance of power. And because Britain now has got a king who is also the stadtholder of the Netherlands, so now Britain and the Dutch Republic are allies, and they are going to be allied now against Louis. So an Anglo-Dutch alliance against Louis XIV. So this will grow into the Grand Alliance, not so different than what you'll see with Napoleon. I mean, it's just when somebody becomes too powerful, you see several countries that are getting involved here. Okay, so with this, Louis, you got the 9 Years' War, but let's go to the War of the Spanish Succession. Now, when we're thinking about, here is Europe in 1700. Now, if we go to 1714, notice here, y'all see where I'm kind of indecisive about what I talk about with, like, England and Scotland. At this time, in 1700, England and Scotland were still separate countries. It's this whole other country. But then, by 1714, you have the Act of Union. Okay, that is putting, that is combining England and Scotland into the kingdom of Great Britain and Ireland. Okay, so with that, now note here that France is not going to change very much. Okay, there's really not a lot that's going to happen. That's why some historians have concluded that Louis's wars were basically vanity wars and just wasteful, because the War of the Spanish Succession is not going to change a whole lot. But this is where we've got, we're thinking about what did they accomplish. Oh, oops. Okay, so I went too far over there. And so with this, we see with the War of the Spanish Succession. Now, this is where Charles II of Spain, the Habsburg ruler here, died without an heir. Now, this is, according to this chart that I found on Reddit, inbred level 5. Okay, so inbred level 5. I mean, basically, there is a point where Mother Nature just decides enough is enough, and she just turns off the tap. Like, there's not going to be an inbred level 6. It's just not going to happen. And so with that, he left a will, and he said that he wanted Louis XIV's grandson to inherit the Spanish throne. Now, of course, that's where the balance of power kicks in. And then the Grand Alliance is invoked. They're like, nope, not going to do that. And Voltaire, always the dramatist, the king was surrounded by enemies on all sides, okay? Louis XIV, I mean, this is like, he's this ruler that I want to pull for him when everybody is like, against him, and of course, it's kind of like, did y'all, any of y'all seen, like, on Instagram, y'all can do I wonder if I should try to do that for European monarchs or something, but like Rap TV, they did the Rap Madness for March. I mean, I couldn't give a darn about basketball, but as far as that goes, like, the Rap Madness on Instagram was actually really fun. If you're following at Rap on Instagram. I mean, they've got a really cool thing on their story where they're going through this. So with that, ladies and gentlemen, what happens here is that Louis, once the Grand Alliance gets into France, Louis basically fights them to a draw. Like, all of Europe is against Louis, and the most they can do is a tie. And so with that, the Treaty of Utrecht, or as the Dutch would say, Utrecht. Okay, so in 1714, basically there can be a Bourbon monarch in Spain, but France and Spain, they must renounce claims to the other throne. So there will not be a unified Bourbon monarchy. France will go back to pre-war borders, okay, so just basically just untouched there. And then Britain will get Gibraltar from Spain. Now, this is going to see, what we're going to note here is that the British are already looking ahead. The next phase of warfare is actually going to be going into like the global balance of power. That's where you're going to get into the 7 Years' War, which you don't need to really know anything about the European theater of the 7 Years' War, but you need to understand that it's going to turn into a global balance of power. And so here in southern Spain, the British get this naval base right there by the Strait of Gibraltar. And so with this, they now have this outpost. And so Britain is already forward thinking here. And, you know, kind of like Peter the Great is when he's building his navy, the British realize that the wars of tomorrow are going to be increasingly global and increasingly naval. When you go to the Napoleonic Wars, that's the case. So Britain is going to become the great maritime power of the 18th and 19th century. And so with that, you know, just seeing here that Louis did not conquer a lot of new territory. France definitely was dominant. Rivals were weakened. Louis got a fair amount of personal glory. So with that, you know, that is basically Louis XIV's wars, one of my favorite, you know, topics in the age of absolutism. So as far as that goes, let's see here. Absolute is compared to the okay, so the new monarchies, what we want to think of with the new monarchies is we want to think about the new monarchies as a stepping stone of sorts. Okay, that the new monarchies, you know, we're seeing something of a stepping stone when we're thinking about this, that the new monarchs are not absolutist in the sense that what you've got to think of is when we're, you know, when we're thinking of Henry VIII, for example, the Act of Supremacy. Okay, so when we think about Henry VIII with the Act of Supremacy, with the English Reformation, Parliament ratified, okay, what was going on. Parliament declared that Henry VIII was the supreme head of the Church of England. Remember, those of you watching on YouTube, feel free to come over to Crowdcast because you're going to be able to ask questions. You'll be able to see when I go live and all of that. But I will check the YouTube chat once in a while, okay? But I'm doing most of my interacting on Crowdcast. So the new monarchies, you know, they are centralizing tax collection. They are asserting control over religion, but they still have to deal with representative bodies, okay? That is the big difference between the new monarchies and the age of absolutism, okay? So absolutism is taking this in another direction there. So with that, let me just go into just for a bit here. Okay, so when we're thinking about what's going on in England at this time, how do I study without crying? That's funny. That's funny. All right, so with that, yeah. So Mr. Good, yeah, you're right that in a lot of cases it's like the Tudor parliaments were kind of a joke, but they were there. It's kind of like, you know, anytime I'm talking about Napoleon, you know, where Napoleon puts out the plebiscite, like, hey, will you ratify this constitution that makes me the emperor of the French and basically gives me absolute power? And people show up to vote, okay? And so they basically rubber stamp what Napoleon is doing. By our standards, it seems kind of strange, but at the same time, the monarch still can only go so far. Okay, when there's a representative body, there's only so much they're going to rubber stamp. And that's what we, of course, can see during the time of the Stuarts, okay, where we're seeing that in the, you know, when we're looking at what's going on in England, we're seeing Stuart absolutism, James I and Charles I. Then we see the interregnum or protectorate with Oliver Cromwell, and then the restoration with Charles II and James II. Now, during this absolutism period, you see that James I and Charles I are both trying to rule absolutely without consulting Parliament as little as possible. James I and Charles I, big advocates of the divine right of kings, okay? And so with this, there is this, you know, going through all this time, there's this, you know, argument, who's got the authority to tax? What is the state religion and how strictly is it going to be enforced? And also, where does sovereignty ultimately reside? Now, I'll let you know, I've got a very detailed lecture series on this. So if you're wanting to really understand what's going on here, I would recommend that very, very detailed lecture series. Now, as far as this goes, you see with the King James Bible, still the monarchy controlling religion. Now, remember the Calvinists, Puritans, and Separatists. You'll need that for U.S. history as well. And so Charles I, he's trying to rule without Parliament. He gets in an argument with Parliament about ship money. Okay, now here's the thing, that under the new monarchies, the monarchy is collecting taxes, but Parliament still had to ratify taxes. And so Charles is trying to get around Parliament by taking a tax that was already collected and just collecting it differently. Instead of collecting it just from coastal towns, I'm going to collect it everywhere. It's not a new tax. So therefore, I can do this without Parliament. Parliament's like, And so ship money, make sure you pronounce that correctly, even though you're going to be writing or typing your test anyway. And so with this, the petition of right, this is where Parliament is giving a petition to Charles I and saying, look, we kind of like you to listen to us a little more. Then Charles basically goes through the next 11 years, not calling Parliament at all. And then you've got the English Civil War in the 1640s, the Cavaliers, the supporters of the king, versus the Roundheads, the supporters of the Long Parliament. And again, this is going to be something that is on my, it's something that is on my YouTube channel. So that's something that, make sure that there are very detailed lectures there. And thank y'all. Yeah, we definitely want to thank Mr. Good, Maddie, everybody here that has been, doing great stuff in the chat. I appreciate that. It's great for this to have the feel of like more of a study session, really. And so with this, let's see, going for that, when we're looking at totalitarianism, one thing that I want to note about totalitarianism is the absolutists were really not nearly as concerned with what people were doing in private. That's one thing that's been said before that I think has a lot of credibility. That when it comes to totalitarianism, there is an effort to control not only public but also private life. And so with that, remember, for example, the Peace of Westphalia in 1648, where the freedom of private worship, by this time, whatever people are doing in private, whatever. Now, the exception being Louis XIV with the Huguenots. Louis just could not stand the Huguenots. I think it's just so funny, like how he was so obsessed with them. But with that, ladies and gentlemen, yeah, so the other thing, so the mobilization of propaganda and mass, and mass movements. Yeah, I think that those are some things that you'll see when you are making those comparisons. So with that, ladies and gentlemen, next Monday at 8 o'clock, I've got all the times. I've got all the times now corrected. I had some 9 o'clock start times, but we will be focusing on the scientific revolution and the Enlightenment. Thank y'all for letting your friends know about these broadcasts. Make sure they know how to get here. And again, we're going to be doing some other skill-based broadcasts as well. So that's going to be something you're definitely wanting to look into. Any advice on how to improve stimulus-based multiple choice questions? I will be doing that. Okay, I will be doing that, Ryan, at a later date. We will be talking about that, not during one of these Monday night sessions, but y'all are going to know, those of y'all who are signed up in Crowdcast, you're going to know when I have other stuff going on. Okay, so with that, comparing. Okay, so we'll get there. Now, I'm skipping a week in 2 weeks. It will be March 29th that I will not be broadcasting because I will be on my spring break and I will be out of the country. And so I don't want to, be in a situation where, oh my goodness, I don't have the internet, or I've been taken prisoner and I'm held for ransom, or something like that. You never know. Okay, so with that, I want to make sure that I don't have y'all expecting something if I'm in a situation where I can't, be here. So I'm just going to plan not to be here on the 29th, and because that's during my spring break. But other than that, every Monday between now and the exam. I believe, unless, yeah, we'll see. Yeah. All right, ladies and gentlemen, y'all follow me on Instagram. Y'all will hear all about my spring break adventure. Believe me. All right. So with that, ladies and gentlemen, again, we will, go into that. Yes, 20th, 19th century isms. Thank you so much, Maggie. You are the best. All right. So with that, ladies and gentlemen, again, I will look forward to seeing y'all next week, and we are going to have a great time preparing for this exam. It is always a pleasure. And you are all welcome, Jew, and Lily, and everybody else. All right.